In 2019, a young couple vanished without a trace after what should have been a peaceful weekend getaway at a lakeside cabin in northern Michigan. Brad and Ashley Miller, both 26 years old and recently engaged, had booked their stay through Airbnb, drawn by the property's pristine photos and stellar reviews. The cabin belonged to Callum Thorne, a superhost who had maintained an impeccable reputation for 4 years running. But when the couple failed to return home on Sunday evening as planned, their families knew something was terribly wrong. The Millers were meticulous planners, the kind of people who always called ahead and never missed work without notice. Their disappearance would launch an investigation that consumed the local sheriff's department for weeks, drawing media attention from across the state as search teams combed the dense forests surrounding Eagle Lake. But 21 days later, investigators made a discovery that would shatter everything they thought they knew about the case. What they found floating in the murky waters 15 miles downstream would expose a truth so shocking that it would forever change how people thought about the hidden dangers lurking behind perfect online reviews and pristine vacation rentals. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The investigation began on Monday morning, October 14th, when Ashley's supervisor at the veterinary clinic called the sheriff's office. Ashley had never missed work without calling, her colleagues explained. She was scheduled to assist with 3 surgeries that day, and her absence left the entire clinic scrambling. Dr. Sarah Chen, the clinic's owner, told deputies that Ashley had been excited about the weekend getaway, mentioning it several times during the previous week. She had even shown Dr. Chen photos of the cabin on her phone, pointing out the stone fireplace and wraparound deck that overlooked the lake. Sheriff Deputy Marcus Thompson took the initial report, noting that the couple had been expected back Sunday evening. Brad worked as an IT specialist for a local manufacturing company, and his absence was equally out of character. His manager, Robert Hayes, confirmed that Brad had requested the days off weeks in advance and had left detailed instructions for covering his responsibilities. Brad was methodical about his work, Hayes explained, the type of employee who triple-checked everything and never left loose ends. The first break in the case came when Deputy Thompson located the couple's rental car, a silver Honda Civic parked at a scenic overlook 3 miles from Callum Thorne's property. The vehicle sat in a gravel lot that local hikers used to access a network of trails leading down to Eagle Lake. Both of their cell phones were found inside the car, along with Ashley's purse and Brad's wallet. Their weekend bags were missing, as were the hiking boots they had packed for the trip. Detective Linda Morrison arrived at the scene within the hour, her 23 years of experience immediately picking up on details that concerned her. The doors were unlocked and the keys were sitting on the front seat. Ashley's phone showed several missed calls from family members and her workplace, while Brad's had multiple texts from his worried parents. Most troubling was the fact that both phones had been turned off since Saturday evening, cutting off any hope of tracking the couple's movements through cell tower data. Detective Morrison's first instinct was to contact Callum Thorne, the owner of the Airbnb property where the couple had stayed. Thorne met her at the cabin within 20 minutes, appearing genuinely concerned about his former guests. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and calloused hands that spoke to years of property maintenance. Thorne explained that he lived year-round in a smaller cabin on the same property, about a quarter mile from the rental unit through a dense stand of pine trees. The story Thorne told seemed straightforward enough. The Millers had checked in Friday afternoon, following the standard self-check-in process he used for all guests. They had seemed like a nice young couple, quiet and polite during their brief interaction when he delivered extra firewood Saturday morning. He had last seen them Saturday afternoon loading day packs for what appeared to be a hiking expedition. When Sunday's checkout time came and went without any sign of the couple, Thorne assumed they had simply left early without going through the formal checkout process, something that happened occasionally with younger guests. Detective Morrison walked through the rental cabin with Thorne, looking for any signs of disturbance or unusual activity. The interior was immaculate, with beds made and dishes washed, as if the couple had tidied up before leaving. Thorne insisted he hadn't touched anything since discovering the couple missing, The only personal items left behind were a phone charger plugged into the bedroom wall and a paperback novel on the nightstand, which both seemed insignificant. What struck Morrison as odd was how perfect everything looked. In her experience, even the tidiest guests typically left some trace of their presence, small signs of life that couldn't be easily erased. But the cabin felt sterile, almost staged, though she couldn't put her finger on exactly why. She made detailed notes about the layout, photographed every room, and collected the few items the couple had left behind. Outside, the search began in earnest. Sheriff deputies organized teams of volunteers from the local community, experienced hikers who knew the terrain around Eagle Lake intimately. The area was popular with outdoor enthusiasts, but could be treacherous for those unfamiliar with its hidden ravines and unmarked cliff faces. Several hikers had been injured over the years, and 2 had died in separate incidents, their bodies recovered from the lake weeks after they had gone missing. Emma Hartley, a local resident who had participated in previous search efforts, joined the teams combing the shoreline. She knew these woods better than most, having grown up exploring every trail in Hidden Cove. Emma's intimate knowledge of the area made her an invaluable resource, and Detective Morrison paired her with Deputy Thompson to search the more remote sections of the lake's eastern shore. Emma explained that the lake's irregular shape created numerous inlets and hidden beaches where someone could easily become disoriented, especially as evening approached and shadows lengthened. The search continued for 3 days without yielding any significant clues. Teams found scattered pieces of trash left by previous hikers, a few items of clothing that turned out to belong to other visitors, and one hiking boot that generated excitement until it was determined to be several sizes too large to belong to either Brad or Ashley. The lake itself posed a particular challenge for searchers. Eagle Lake was deeper than it appeared, with underwater drop-offs and submerged logs that could trap anything that fell beneath the surface. On Thursday morning, Detective Morrison decided to expand her investigation beyond the immediate search area. She began conducting interviews with other recent guests of Thorne's Airbnb property, hoping to identify any patterns or concerns that might shed light on the couple's disappearance. What she discovered was a host with an obsessive attention to his online reputation and an increasingly strained relationship with guests who failed to meet his exacting standards. Jennifer Walsh had stayed at the cabin just 2 weeks before the Millers, and her experience painted a troubling picture of Thorne's behavior. Jennifer, a marketing executive from Grand Rapids, told Morrison that she had felt uncomfortable during her stay, sensing that she was being watched despite the property's apparent isolation. She described seeing movement in the tree line between the rental cabin and Thorne's residence and feeling as though someone was monitoring her activities throughout the weekend. Most concerning was Jennifer's account of Thorne's reaction to a minor complaint about the cabin's water pressure. When she mentioned the issue during checkout, Thorne became defensive and agitated, explaining in great detail how much money he had invested in the property's plumbing system. He then insisted on showing her his guest reviews on the Airbnb platform, pointing to his near-perfect rating and superhost status as evidence that her concerns were unfounded. Jennifer found his behavior odd enough that she considered leaving a negative review, but ultimately decided against it, not wanting to damage what appeared to be a small business owner's livelihood. Detective Morrison's interview with Jennifer revealed another troubling detail. Thorne had contacted Jennifer several days after her stay, calling her cell phone to follow up on her experience and specifically asking whether she planned to leave a review. When Jennifer confirmed that she had already posted a positive review, Thorne seemed relieved and thanked her profusely for her honesty and fairness. The conversation lasted nearly 15 minutes, with Thorne repeatedly emphasizing how important guest feedback was to his business and his family's financial security.
Similar patterns emerged from Morrison's interviews with other recent guests. Michael and Patricia Chen, an elderly couple from Chicago, described feeling pressured by Thorne to leave a positive review. Thorne had called them twice after their departure, once to thank them for choosing his property, and again to remind them about the importance of Airbnb reviews to small business owners. The Chens found his persistence annoying but not alarming, ultimately leaving a 4-star review that praised the cabin's amenities while noting that the host's communication had been somewhat intrusive. More disturbing was the account from college students Jake Morrison and Tyler Reed, who had rented the cabin for a bachelor party weekend in early September. The young men described an increasingly tense interaction with Thorne after they accidentally broke a decorative lamp while moving furniture to accommodate their group activities. Thorne demanded immediate payment for the damage, threatening to contact Airbnb and local authorities if the students refused to cover the full replacement cost. The incident escalated when Tyler suggested that the lamp's placement made it vulnerable to damage, prompting Thorne to lecture them about respect for other people's property and the challenges of maintaining a rental business. What concerned Detective Morrison most about Jake and Tyler's account was Thorne's reaction when they left a 3-star review mentioning the damaged lamp and their host's aggressive response. Thorne had called Jake's cell phone repeatedly over the following week, alternating between apologetic explanations for his behavior and angry demands that they revise their review. When the students refused to change their rating, Thorne began sending increasingly agitated text messages warning them that negative reviews could destroy his business and suggesting that they didn't understand the financial pressures facing small property owners. Detective Morrison decided to examine Thorne's complete review history on the Airbnb platform, and what she found revealed a man whose identity and financial security were inextricably tied to his online reputation. Over 4 years of hosting, Thorne had received more than 200 reviews, with an overall rating of 4.7 stars. The overwhelming majority of guests had left glowing praise for the property's cleanliness, amenities, and scenic location. However, Morrison noticed that negative reviews were extremely rare, and when they did appear, they often prompted lengthy, defensive responses from Thorne that bordered on hostile. One particularly telling exchange involved a family from Detroit who had left a 2-star review complaining about noise from Thorne's own residence during their stay. The guests mentioned being awakened by power tools and construction activity before 7 in the morning, disrupting what was supposed to be a peaceful retreat. Thorne's response was a paragraph-long defense of his right to maintain his property, followed by accusations that the family had damaged items in the cabin and suggesting that they were trying to avoid paying for their careless behavior. Morrison discovered that the family had subsequently revised their review, upgrading it to 4 stars and removing the specific complaints about noise. When she contacted them directly, the mother reluctantly admitted that Thorne had called multiple times after their stay, eventually wearing them down with alternating apologies and veiled threats about reporting them to Airbnb for property damage. They had changed their review simply to end the harassment, not because their concerns had been addressed. The pattern was becoming clear. Callum Thorne was a man whose livelihood depended entirely on maintaining his perfect online reputation, and he was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to pressure guests into leaving positive reviews. His superhost status generated thousands of dollars in additional bookings each year, and even a small decline in his overall rating could cost him significant income. Morrison began to wonder what lengths Thorne might go to protect his business from a truly damaging review. While Morrison continued her investigation into Thorne's background and guest relationships, the physical search for Brad and Ashley Miller was expanding beyond Eagle Lake itself. Specialized dive teams had been brought in from the state police, but the lake's depth and murky water made underwater searches extremely challenging. The teams could only work in small sections at a time, methodically covering areas where currents might have carried bodies or personal belongings. Search coordinator Captain Tom Bradley explained to the families that the lake's unique characteristics made recovery difficult under ideal conditions. Eagle Lake was fed by underground springs that created unpredictable currents beneath the surface, and its bottom was covered with decades of accumulated organic matter that reduced visibility to mere inches. If the couple had somehow fallen into the lake, their bodies might not surface for weeks or even months, depending on water temperature and other environmental factors. Brad's father, George Miller, struggled to understand how 2 experienced hikers could simply vanish without a trace. His son had been camping and hiking since childhood, and Ashley was equally comfortable in outdoor settings. Both were strong swimmers, and they had packed appropriate gear for their weekend adventure. George spent hours studying topographical maps of the area, trying to identify locations where the couple might have gotten into trouble, but the search teams had already covered every accessible trail and known hazard. Ashley's mother, Carol Stevens, focused her energy on social media, posting photographs of the couple and detailed descriptions of their planned activities. Her posts were shared hundreds of times, generating tips from across the state as people reported possible sightings of the missing pair. Most leads proved to be false alarms, but each one required follow-up investigation, stretching the sheriff's department's resources even thinner. The investigation took a significant turn when Detective Morrison received a phone call from Lisa Patterson, a guest who had stayed at Thorne's property the weekend before the Millers disappeared. Lisa had initially hesitated to contact police, unsure whether her experience was relevant to the missing persons case. But after seeing news coverage of the investigation, she felt compelled to share what she had witnessed during her stay. Lisa described an incident that occurred late Saturday night during her visit. She had been reading on the cabin's deck when she heard raised voices coming from the direction of Thorne's residence. The argument seemed to involve Thorne and at least one other person, though she couldn't make out specific words or identify other voices. What concerned her was the intensity and duration of the confrontation, which continued for nearly 30 minutes before ending abruptly. Lisa had considered investigating but decided against leaving the safety of the rental cabin in the dark. More troubling was Lisa's account of finding Thorne outside her cabin early Sunday morning, apparently examining the property for damage or disturbances. When she questioned him about his presence, Thorne claimed he was conducting his usual maintenance inspection, but Lisa found his explanation unconvincing. He seemed agitated and distracted, repeatedly checking his phone and looking toward the lake as if expecting something to happen. Lisa had cut her stay short, leaving several hours earlier than planned because she felt uncomfortable with Thorne's behavior. Detective Morrison arranged to interview Lisa in person, hoping to extract additional details that might prove significant. Lisa's description of Thorne's demeanor during her final morning at the property painted a picture of a man under considerable stress. He had insisted on personally inspecting every room of the cabin before she departed, claiming it was standard procedure, but examining the space with unusual intensity. Lisa particularly remembered Thorne spending several minutes in the bedroom, checking behind furniture and examining the walls as if looking for something specific. When Morrison asked Lisa about her interaction with Thorne after her departure, another concerning pattern emerged. Unlike other guests, Lisa had not received follow-up calls or pressure to leave a review. Thorne's usual post-stay communication was completely absent, which Lisa found strange given his reputation for attentive customer service. She had ultimately left a positive review on her own initiative, but Thorne had never acknowledged or responded to it, breaking his established pattern of thanking guests for their feedback. Morrison's interview with Lisa also revealed details about the physical layout of Thorne's property that hadn't emerged during her initial investigation. Lisa described seeing what appeared to be surveillance cameras mounted on trees around the rental cabin, though Thorne had never mentioned security equipment in his property listing or during her brief interactions. The cameras were partially concealed by branches and might easily be missed by guests who weren't specifically looking for them. When Morrison confronted Thorne about the presence of surveillance equipment, his reaction was immediately defensive. He admitted to installing cameras around the property, but claimed they were only active when the cabin was unoccupied, serving as a deterrent for vandalism and theft. Thorne insisted that he never recorded guests and that the cameras were clearly disclosed in his house rules, though Morrison's review of his Airbnb listing found no mention of surveillance equipment anywhere in the description.
The revelation about hidden cameras prompted Morrison to obtain a search warrant for Thorne's property, including both his residence and any electronic equipment that might contain recordings of guest activities. The warrant was executed on October 22nd, 8 days after the couple's disappearance, with technicians from the State Police Digital Forensics Unit assisting in the collection of evidence. What they discovered in Thorne's home office was a sophisticated surveillance system that recorded activity throughout his property 24 hours a day. Despite his claims that cameras were inactive during guest stays, the system contained hundreds of hours of footage showing previous visitors in various states of privacy, including recordings from inside the rental cabin itself. The scope of the surveillance was far beyond what any reasonable security system would require, and it was clear that Thorne had been systematically violating his guests' privacy for years. Among the recovered recordings, investigators found footage from the Millers' weekend stay that contradicted several elements of Thorne's initial statements. The couple had indeed returned to the cabin Saturday evening after their hiking trip, and they had spent considerable time on the deck discussing their experience at the property. While the audio quality was poor, investigators could make out portions of their conversation that suggested they had discovered something disturbing during their stay. The recording showed Ashley using her laptop computer for an extended period Saturday evening, while Brad appeared to be taking photographs with his phone. Their body language suggested tension and concern, with both of them frequently looking toward the tree line where Thorne's residence was located. Most significantly, the footage showed both of them outside the cabin late Saturday night, examining something near the foundation of the building with flashlights. Detective Morrison brought in audio specialists to enhance the recovered recordings, hoping to extract clearer dialogue from the couple's conversations. The enhanced audio revealed fragments of discussion about cameras and reviews, with Ashley expressing concern about what we found and Brad mentioning reporting this. While the full context remained unclear, it was obvious that the couple had discovered something about their host or his property that had seriously alarmed them. The surveillance footage also documented Thorne's movements during the weekend, revealing behavior that directly contradicted his statements to investigators. Rather than the minimal contact he had described, Thorne had approached the rental cabin multiple times during the couple's stay, often when they were away hiking. The recording showed him using a key to enter the cabin, spending significant time inside while the couple was absent. Most disturbing was footage from late Saturday night showing Thorne approaching the cabin while the couple was outside with their flashlights. The video quality made it difficult to see exactly what transpired, but there was clearly an interaction between Thorne and his guests that lasted several minutes. The couple appeared agitated during this encounter, with Brad gesturing towards something near the cabin's foundation, while Ashley backed away from Thorne. The surveillance footage ended abruptly just after midnight Saturday, with the final frames showing Thorne walking quickly toward his residence while the couple retreated into the rental cabin. No recordings existed from Sunday morning through the couple's planned departure time, and technical analysis revealed that the system had been manually shut down, not simply malfunctioned. Morrison's investigation into Thorne's financial situation revealed the extent to which his livelihood depended on maintaining his perfect online reputation. Bank records showed that his Airbnb income constituted more than 60% of his total earnings, with superhost status generating premium pricing that added thousands of dollars to his annual revenue. Any significant decline in his review ratings would directly impact his ability to attract bookings and maintain his current rates. More concerning was evidence of Thorne's increasingly desperate efforts to control his online image. Phone records revealed dozens of calls to recent guests, many lasting 20 minutes or longer, as Thorne attempted to influence their review submissions. Text message records showed a pattern of escalating pressure tactics, beginning with polite requests for positive feedback and progressing to barely veiled threats about reporting guests for fabricated property damage. Financial analysis also revealed that Thorne was carrying substantial debt related to property improvements designed to enhance his Airbnb offering. He had borrowed heavily to upgrade the cabin's amenities, install premium furnishings, and maintain the pristine appearance that his marketing photos portrayed. His debt service consumed a significant portion of his rental income, leaving him financially vulnerable to any disruption in his booking schedule. The investigation expanded to include Thorne's employment history and background, revealing a pattern of conflicts with employers and colleagues throughout his adult life. Former coworkers described him as intelligent and capable, but prone to explosive anger when his work was criticized or questioned. Several previous employers mentioned incidents where Thorne had responded disproportionately to negative feedback,
including confrontations with supervisors that had led to his departure from multiple positions. Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist consulted by the Sheriff's Department, reviewed Thorne's behavioral patterns and provided insight into his psychological profile. Dr. Foster explained that Thorne exhibited characteristics consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, including an overwhelming need for external validation and an inability to process criticism constructively. His extreme reaction to negative reviews likely stemmed from a deep-seated fear of exposure and a compulsive need to maintain his public image. According to Dr. Foster, individuals with Thorne's profile often experience negative feedback as existential threats rather than simple business setbacks. The prospect of a damaging review would generate anxiety severe enough to motivate extreme defensive behaviors, potentially including violence against perceived threats to their reputation. Dr. Foster cautioned that Thorne's financial dependence on his online image would only amplify these psychological pressures, creating conditions where he might view guests who threatened his reputation as genuine enemies. While Morrison continued building her case against Thorne, the physical search for Brad and Ashley Miller had expanded to include waterways downstream from Eagle Lake. Search teams were now combing Mill Creek, which carried runoff from the lake through a series of rapids and pools before joining the Pine River 15 miles to the south. The terrain along the creek was largely inaccessible by vehicle, requiring searchers to hike through dense forest while examining every accessible stretch of water. On November 4th, 21 days after the couple's disappearance, volunteer searcher Kevin Marsh made the discovery that would transform the investigation from a missing persons case into a homicide inquiry. Marsh, a retired park ranger familiar with the area's waterways, was examining a debris jam in Mill Creek when he spotted something that didn't belong among the accumulated branches and organic matter. Partially submerged beneath a fallen log, Marsh found 2 pieces of high-end luggage that appeared to be recent additions to the debris field. The suitcases were distinctive, matching designer pieces in a pattern that was relatively uncommon and easily identifiable. Both bags had been damaged by their time in the water, but their contents remained partially intact, protected by the luggage's water-resistant construction. Inside the bags, investigators found clothing and personal items that definitively belonged to Brad and Ashley Miller. Driver's license and waterproof cases confirmed the identity of the luggage owners, while clothing items matched descriptions provided by the couple's families. Most significantly, investigators discovered Ashley's laptop computer, the same device that surveillance footage had shown her using during their final evening at Thorne's cabin. The condition and location of the luggage immediately raised questions about how it had ended up in Mill Creek, 15 miles from their last known location. The debris jam where the bags were found had accumulated over several weeks, but the luggage appeared to have been added to the collection recently. Water damage patterns suggested the bags had been submerged for an extended period, but their position in the debris field indicated they had been moved by current or deliberately placed rather than simply falling from an upstream location. Detective Morrison coordinated with the State Police Crime Scene Unit to process the luggage and its contents as potential evidence in a homicide investigation. While the couple's fate remained unknown, the discovery of their belongings in a location so far from their intended hiking area strongly suggested that their disappearance was not the result of a simple accident or voluntary departure.
Ashley's laptop proved to be the most crucial piece of evidence recovered from the luggage. Despite water damage to its exterior, the computer's hard drive remained partially functional, and digital forensic specialists were able to extract data from its memory. What they found provided the first clear picture of what Brad and Ashley had discovered during their stay at Thorne's property, and why they had felt compelled to leave negative feedback about their experience. The laptop contained photographs taken during the couple's weekend stay, including images that documented their discovery of Thorne's extensive surveillance system. Ashley had photographed hidden cameras mounted throughout the rental cabin, capturing evidence of recording equipment concealed in air vents, light fixtures, and decorative objects. The images showed cameras positioned to monitor guests in bedrooms, bathrooms, and other private spaces where any surveillance would constitute a serious violation of privacy.
More damaging were screenshots Ashley had captured from what appeared to be a live video feed, showing real-time surveillance footage of their own activities inside the cabin. The images proved that Thorne's surveillance system was not only extensive, but actively recording guests throughout their stays, despite his claims that cameras were only used for security when the property was unoccupied. The laptop also contained a draft review that Ashley had been preparing for Airbnb, detailing their discovery of the surveillance equipment and expressing outrage at Thorne's violation of their privacy. Review described finding cameras hidden throughout the cabin and warned future guests about being recorded without consent in private spaces. Ashley's draft review included specific details about camera locations and urged Airbnb to investigate Thorne's property for privacy violations. Most significantly, the laptop revealed that Ashley had been researching legal options for reporting Thorne's surveillance activities to authorities. Her browser history showed searches for privacy laws, hidden camera regulations, and procedures for filing complaints with law enforcement agencies. She had also researched Airbnb's policies regarding host misconduct and had begun compiling evidence to support a formal complaint against Thorne. The digital evidence painted a clear picture of the couple's final hours at the property. After discovering the surveillance equipment, they had spent Saturday evening documenting the violations and preparing to expose Thorne's illegal activities. Their conversation with Thorne late Saturday night, captured partially on his own surveillance system, had likely involved confronting him about their discoveries and threatening to report his behavior to authorities. Dr. Foster's psychological profile of Thorne took on new significance in light of this evidence. For someone whose entire livelihood and identity depended on maintaining a perfect online reputation, the threat of exposure for serious privacy violations would represent an existential crisis. Ashley's planned review would not only damage his ratings, but could potentially result in criminal charges, the loss of his superhost status, and the complete destruction of his rental business. Morrison's investigation now focused on establishing what had happened after the couple's confrontation with Thorne on Saturday night. The surveillance footage ended too early to document the resolution of their conflict, but other evidence suggested that Thorne had taken desperate measures to prevent the couple from following through on their threats to expose his illegal surveillance activities. Analysis of Thorne's cell phone records revealed significant activity in the hours immediately following the final surveillance footage. He had made multiple calls to unknown numbers and had sent numerous text messages, many of which had subsequently been deleted from his device. Digital forensic specialists worked to recover the deleted communications, hoping to establish Thorne's state of mind and actions during the critical time period. The recovered text messages revealed Thorne's growing panic as he realized the full extent of the threat the couple posed to his livelihood. Messages to a contact identified as his brother showed Thorne expressing fear that everything was going to be ruined and asking for advice about making this go away. His brother's responses urged him to remain calm and suggested that he contact a lawyer, but Thorne's subsequent messages indicated that he believed the situation was too serious for conventional solutions. Most troubling were messages Thorne had sent to himself, apparently as a way of organizing his thoughts during the crisis. These messages outlined potential scenarios for handling the problem and included references to making it look like an accident and buying time to figure this out. While the messages were cryptic and could be interpreted in multiple ways, their content strongly suggested that Thorne was contemplating violence against the couple. Morrison's reconstruction of events began to take shape as more evidence emerged. She theorized that Thorne had confronted the couple Saturday night after realizing they had discovered his surveillance system. When the couple threatened to expose his illegal activities and leave a devastating review, Thorne had panicked and decided to take extreme measures to protect his business and reputation. The surveillance footage showed the couple retreating into their cabin after their interaction with Thorne, but investigators believed that Thorne had returned later that night or early Sunday morning to prevent them from leaving the property. Given his intimate knowledge of the local terrain and his apparent willingness to take desperate measures, Thorne would have had multiple opportunities to intercept the couple and prevent them from exposing his activities. The location where the couple's luggage was eventually discovered provided additional clues about Thorne's actions.
Mill Creek was accessible from Thorne's property through a network of logging roads that avoided public areas where his vehicle might be noticed. The creek's current would naturally carry items downstream toward the Pine River, making it an attractive location for disposing of evidence while creating the impression that the couple had met with an accident elsewhere. Morrison organized a comprehensive search of the area between Thorne's property and the location where the luggage was discovered. Search teams examined every accessible section of Mill Creek, looking for additional evidence that might have been disposed of along with the luggage. They also searched the logging roads that connected Thorne's property to the creek, hoping to find tire tracks or other physical evidence of his presence in the area. The search yielded several significant discoveries that strengthened the case against Thorne. Investigators found tire tracks along one of the logging roads that matched the tread pattern of Thorne's pickup truck, though the tracks were too degraded to provide definitive proof of when they had been made. More significantly, they discovered an area near the creek where the vegetation had been disturbed, suggesting that someone had recently accessed the water from the bank. Crime scene technicians processed the disturbed area for physical evidence, collecting soil samples and examining the surrounding vegetation for signs of recent activity. They found several items that appeared to be related to the couple's disappearance, including fragments of fabric that matched clothing descriptions provided by the families. Most importantly, they discovered traces of blood on rocks near the water's edge, though DNA analysis would be required to determine whether the blood belonged to the missing couple. The accumulating evidence convinced Morrison that she had sufficient grounds to arrest Callum Thorne on charges related to the couple's disappearance. However, she wanted to conduct one final interview with Thorne before making an arrest, hoping to extract additional information or possibly even a confession that would strengthen her case. Morrison arranged to meet Thorne at the sheriff's department, ostensibly to discuss new developments in the search for the missing couple. Thorne agreed to the interview, though his demeanor had changed significantly since their initial conversations.
He appeared anxious and defensive, frequently checking his phone and asking about the status of the investigation. During the interview, Morrison presented Thorne with evidence of his extensive surveillance system and questioned him about his violations of guest privacy. Thorne initially attempted to deny the existence of hidden cameras in private areas of the cabin, but when confronted with photographs from Ashley's laptop, he became agitated and demanded to speak with an attorney. Morrison then revealed the discovery of the couple's luggage in Mill Creek and questioned Thorne about his knowledge of their whereabouts. Thorne's reaction was immediate and telling. He became visibly upset and began making statements that suggested guilt rather than concern for the missing guests. He repeatedly mentioned his business and reputation, expressing fears about what the investigation would do to his livelihood rather than showing appropriate concern for the couple's welfare. Most damaging was Thorne's response when Morrison asked about his activities on Sunday morning, the day the couple was scheduled to depart. Thorne's account contradicted statements he had made earlier, and he seemed unable to provide a coherent timeline of his movements during the critical hours when the couple had disappeared. His story changed multiple times during the interview, with Thorne eventually claiming he couldn't remember his activities due to stress and worry about his missing guests.
The interview was terminated when Thorne's attorney arrived and advised him to cease cooperation with the investigation. However, Morrison had obtained enough information to convince the district attorney that charges were appropriate. On November 8th, 4 days after the discovery of the luggage, Callum Thorne was arrested on charges of kidnapping and murder in connection with the disappearance of Brad and Ashley Miller. The arrest generated intense media coverage, with news outlets focusing on the role of online reviews and surveillance technology in the alleged crimes. Airbnb issued a statement expressing concern about the charges against one of their hosts and announced an investigation into Thorne's property listing and guest interactions. The company also implemented new policies requiring hosts to disclose all surveillance equipment and prohibiting cameras in private areas of rental properties. Thorne's arrest was only the beginning of a complex legal process that would ultimately determine his guilt or innocence.
The evidence against him was circumstantial but compelling, painting a picture of a man whose obsession with his online reputation had driven him to commit unthinkable acts against innocent guests who had threatened to expose his illegal activities. The case highlighted the hidden dangers that could lurk behind even the most positive online reviews and perfect host ratings. Brad and Ashley Miller had chosen Thorne's property based on its stellar reputation and beautiful photographs, never suspecting that their host was systematically violating guests' privacy and was capable of violence when his deception was discovered. While the legal proceedings against Thorne continued, the families of Brad and Ashley Miller continued to search for closure and answers about their loved one's final fate. The discovery of the luggage had confirmed their worst fears about the couple's survival, but without recovering their bodies, the families struggled to find peace and begin the difficult process of grieving their loss. The investigation had revealed the shocking truth about what had happened during that seemingly peaceful weekend getaway, exposing a web of deception, surveillance, and ultimately violence that had claimed 2 innocent lives. The case served as a stark reminder that the digital age's promise of transparency and accountability could be manipulated by those willing to go to extraordinary lengths to maintain false reputations and hide their true nature from unsuspecting victims. Months later, as investigators continued their painstaking work to build an airtight case against Thorne, the story of Brad and Ashley Miller's disappearance resonated far beyond their local community. Their tragic fate had exposed the dark side of the sharing economy and the potential dangers faced by travelers who trusted online reviews and host ratings without considering the possibility that perfect reputations might be maintained through deception, manipulation, and ultimately violence. The young couple's discovery of Thorne's surveillance system and their courage in deciding to expose his legal activities had cost them their lives. But their sacrifice had also revealed a predator who had been systematically violating guests' privacy for years. Their story would serve as a lasting reminder of the importance of vigilance and the hidden costs of trusting others based solely on their carefully crafted online personas.